Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about the biggest topic this week, which is have we started World War III already? This is following Biden's approval for Ukraine to use US long range missiles to hit inside Russia. Now, Ukraine has already started doing this. Ukraine has fired US supplied long range missiles at Russian territory for the first time. So they've actually done that. They've hit the Bryansk region. Now, where's Bryansk region? It is over here, which is close to, it's basically on the border of Ukraine. Why is this a big issue? Well, so far, Ukraine has been fighting Russia inside of Ukrainian territory, or what was Ukrainian territory. And so it hasn't kind of been in a direct escalation with Russia inside Russia for the most part. But now what we're seeing is that instead of, before it was the Russia Ukraine, a lot of people labeled it as a proxy war between Russia and the US because US is it's supplying billions of dollars to it. When we say supplying billions of dollars, the money isn't actually going to Ukraine. They're actually going to the military companies in the US that are manufacturing the equipment that is being sent to Ukraine to fight the Russians. And why does the US want that? Well, there's the argument that it needs to defend, freedom and sovereign nations around the world. But the reality is, I think we can all agree that it wants to damage Russian influence. It wants to bankrupt Russia. It wants to ensure that Russia is kind of gets stuck into this kind of forever war with Ukraine. Now, is there a possibility for Ukraine to win this war? Ukraine versus Russia. Let's look at the map again. This kind of, country versus this kind of country. Obviously, Russia has so much more military capabilities and can withstand for a very long time this kind of war, in spite of the restrictions applied by the US and Europe with respect to not buying Russian gas, even though Russian gas is actually flowing into Europe. Financial restrictions. The only thing that these restrictions have done is pushed Russia more closely to China and to focus on developing the BRICS organization, which is making more countries join BRICS, which is going to be a force that is going to be against kind of the US, really. Right now, it doesn't compare to the US, but in the future, that is something that will be I think a great contender, which reduces US dominance in the world. So what's actually happening is that there's 5 ATACMS missiles, which were provided by the US. These were shut down by air defense systems in Russia, while one was damaged, the fragments of which fell into this kind of military facility, which caused a fire. So it hasn't really caused much damage. There's no casualties. Well, that's what the Russians are saying. What's happening also is that the UK is also providing these long range missiles that Ukraine can use. And Europe, Germany said, we're not going to get involved in this. Russia has indicated that this is an escalation and it has actually lowered the threshold for nuclear weapons use. Now, Russia has multiple times said we're going to use nuclear if you do this, and NATO or Ukraine has done this, and Russia hasn't applied their nuclear weapons. I don't think Russia's going to apply nuclear weapons because it would rally the whole world against Russia. You could argue that maybe Russia is doing this because of NATO expansion. There's a lot of arguments about Russia's doing this because it's protecting, the Russian ethnic speakers and the Ukrainian regions. However, if Russia uses their nuclear weapons, that's it. It's actually kind of a win for the West and for the US because everyone's going to rally against Russia. And people will be using their nuclear weapons against Russia, which would kill millions of people. I don't think it's going to lead to that, but it doesn't mean it won't lead to World War III where nuclear weapons are not used. This is clearly now, I think it's very clear that the US is fighting Russia now because US weapons are being used to shoot, to hit Russian bases. Now, imagine if the opposite was true. There was a country that was using Russian weapons to hit the US in US soil. How do you think US would react to that? Of course, the US would go crazy and go full on attacking that country that's supplying the weapons to that other country that's hitting the US soil. So this is clearly an escalation. And while this is happening, where is Mr. Biden, who, let's be honest, didn't really approve this? Someone else approved this. Well, Biden is in the Amazon uh, talking about climate change, which is, I mean, it's so ridiculous. We're talking about climate change while we're about to have World War III, while we're escalating the war, while there's going to be thousands more casualties on top of the thousands of casualties that already exist from both sides, the Ukrainian and Russian. And where's the priority of the president that's kind of pushing for this? It's climate change. I'm not saying climate change is not important, but like let's let's put first things first. And I think the crazy thing of all this is that I never thought it would be the Democrats that would be kind of trying to escalate the war, and the Republicans under Trump would be de-escalating the war. Now, there's a very clear winner from all this. It's not going to be the Russians. It's not going to be the Ukrainians. It's going to be the military companies that are going to make billions from this escalation at the cost of U.S. Civilians and military personnel, Ukrainians, Russians, but it doesn't matter. It's never mattered. Now, a lot of people say, well, Ukraine, why are we holding Ukraine's back? Why are we telling Ukraine to fight Russia while kind of having its hands behind its back and not being allowed to use weapons inside of Russia? Because it is an escalation. Why are we doing this? Why are we pushing these countries to fight more fiercely with each other when one has a lot more military capability? I mean, Russia could just demolish Ukraine if it wanted to, but obviously that would be a political suicide. But it has the capability to do that. It would receive a reaction that it does not want. But why are we pushing them to kind of, or increasing the chances of that happening? So this is what I think will happen. Russia will use more firepower to attack Ukrainians and Ukraine. I don't think it will use nuclear, even though it's threatened with nuclear, because I think that's just, it's bad for Russia if they use nuclear. I think that pushes the whole world against them. But Russia will not leave that region. So, the US can convince Ukraine to keep on fighting, and as one of them said, to the last Ukrainian. But Russia is not going to leave that region. What I think the West is trying to do is to create a situation whereby the West has to support Ukraine further because of the escalation from what is going to be perceived as Russian escalation, even though right now what we're seeing is Ukrainian escalation at this moment. And it's going to put pressure such that even when Trump comes in, he's going to find himself in a situation whereby he has to support Ukraine because of what Russia is doing in Ukraine, which is going to be 10 times more what it is doing right now in Ukraine. So it's kind of creating a situation for Trump where he cannot just accept what Russia is doing. I think that is the hope. What I'm hoping for is Russia doesn't escalate further from what is happening, from the escalation that we're seeing from Ukraine now, and that we wait it out until Trump comes in and resolve the conflict. And unfortunately, the resolving the conflict will involve annexing some parts of Ukraine to Russia to make peace. I don't think there's going to be a situation where Russia's just going to go back to, the previous border, especially with so many of its men dying and all the, sanctions that it's facing. Um, but at least we want to get to a situation where there is no nuclear war and there is some peace, that would save thousands, if not millions, of lives, and for us to stop spending money on war that is just going to the military companies. That's my hope. Let's see what happens.